We were on a trip to the local Taru museum that she had won some awards for poetry. I said, would you be able to write me a poem about the fishing trip and your experience of going on the fishing trip? We did a recital of the poem around the fire and people chipped in, but 90% of the poem was written in one go. That's how Machi came about. Hi.
Hi, hi, Owen. I'm Isha. I'm the assistant festival programmer at AltF, and thank you so much for agreeing to do the interview with us. Okay, so how you got into filmmaking and how did the idea for Machi actually come in?
But film came to me quite late, but it was a an initial interest. So when I was choosing what to study at university back in 2007, I had some references on TV. There's the likes of Bruce Parry, etc., who were making content that was culturally sensitive and expanded my horizons of what was possible through film. But I knew that it was very niche in terms of I didn't want to be involved in film just to be involved in film. But I thought, you know what, that's a super interesting genre within documentary. Back then, there was no clear pathway for me to pursue, or at least I didn't know about one. And I still, super young, didn't know exactly what it meant to be involved. Was it like making tea for the crew, or was it being the cameraman, or was it negotiating the access? It wasn't obvious to me. So I went off and studied cultural anthropology at the University of Sussex, and I thought that that was at the time a very good degree to pursue my interest in this area, people, plants, animals.
And how did Machi come into picture? Like, what inspired you to make Machi, and how did that idea even come about?
Yeah, so I mean, the big part of the context for all of this is that my father is an anthropologist, and he has been working with the Taru in the west of Nepal for 40 years. He is the for this call specifically as a, context because I joined him in Magi, which is the New Year's celebration with the Taru, and um, he speaks Taru and Nepalese. So I went there with my camera with him just to hang out with him really and hang out with the people that he spent all this time with who are very good friends. So yeah, I mean that's important context. Now in terms of Machi, it was a very open and free kind of creation. I have the life experience that I have and the interest that I have, and I've been sort of involved with environmental filmmaking. I have a background in anthropology, and we had agreed that I would film the fishing trip led by the women-led fishing trip the 2 days before Marg, where they go and hope to catch a load of fish and then prepare them, and they have this sort of exchange, cultural exchanges that happen. They have dancing, they share a lot of food, and they go to each other's houses and things. And fish is a part of that. So yeah, and I went on that fishing trip, and I was kind of struck by the size of the fish, how hard it was to catch these fish, and how little fish there was. So I was just kind of and I did multiple things whilst I was there. I went and caught black crabs, freshwater black crabs from the river. I filmed their morning rituals and exchange of grains and various other things that they do through Magi Festival, the dancing, etc. Um, and just in conversation with the woman there that's nearest my age, who also incidentally has the best English. We were on a trip to the local Taru museum that she had won some awards for poetry in the at school and in the local area. And I just started thinking, she was in the fishing group. I said, would you be able to write me a poem about the fishing trip and your experience of going on the fishing trip? Because I think that would provide a beautiful narrative. No matter what she created, it would still make it really interesting to have that voice. So that's how Machi came about. And I knew about electrofishing. I mean, I'd even been on the crab, like looking for the crab trip, and there was in the side of one of my shots there was people doing it, and they said, they didn't want to be filmed. And members of the community have spoken about potentially the link between electrofishing and other activities on fish stock or fish populations. So I sort of had this idea that maybe not all was well, and I sort of found it quite strange to spend 6 hours or 5 hours, looking for these fish and coming back with so little. It seemed like a lot of energy, you know. But yeah, so that's how Machi came into being.
Your father being an anthropologist and him actually knowing the community so well, I think really helped with you also sort of going into that community and shooting film, which is absolutely brilliant. How did the idea of poetry really come about? Is it because Sangeeta was somebody who was into poem and poetry, or did you also have a knack for the spoken word?
It came about that organically. Sangeeta said she was a poet, and I thought, well, if it goes how I think it could go in my mind, then we will have an opportunity to hear a local voice articulating very eloquently the community's shared experiences around concerns in the environment. And I think that it resonates outwards and is a beautiful example of how art, sort of artistic expression, and film come together to it could be done in the written word in a textual way, but it's something you deliver a lot of information very quickly with the visual image and with the poem. And poems have an incredible way of weaving together things that are usually talked about separately. So the way that, she makes us think about the role of fish outside of the water and inside the water. She moves between childlike kind of references. She even is in commune with the fish themselves at one point, and then is more talking about how woven the experience is together if you do live and come from somewhere and you've experienced it over time.
Did you find any challenges when shooting in such a in a community that you are not, part of? I know your father was working there, but you personally were not there, and you were somebody who was new in that community. So, did you face any challenges?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously an element of trust there already, which was very helpful. It's a long career working with the same people that my father's had, and has built a lot of trust that way and friendship as well. It's not just a kind of old school kind of notepad and participant observation. It's very much just now go and hang out and see old friends. So when I was kind of asking if I could film the fishing trip, I just said, just please ignore me. And that never normally happens. A kid is going to come up and sort of wave in the thing and in the camera, and people freeze up and tend to feel very watched, and none of that happened. I mean, I didn't get anyone to do anything again. I wasn't like, can you pick this up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. I just was a fly on the wall for the whole thing, and everything you see there is pretty much as it was. I didn't say do it again, and I just sort of tried to measure the distance appropriately, not get too close, not interfere, not make people feel uncomfortable. I was using a zoom lens, so I was able to manage distance that way as well. Yeah, and I suppose the other thing to mention is, you don't want to be naming people unless it's absolutely necessary. Sangeeta was very happy to put her name forward as the poet, but you don't necessarily want people reaching out to this community without going through the proper channels. So,
One interesting thing is that the poem is completely in the local Tharu language, right? And it's translated in English. So sometimes what happens is, words can get lost in translation or something, the essence or the emotions might get lost when translating from one language to the other. So how did you sort of navigate that? Because this film is so heavily dependent on the spoken word.
my father did the initial translation, but knew that there were certain things that we'd have to run by Sangeeta a number of times to make sure she's actually saying what we think she's saying. And there's some subtleties in there that you have to check. We did a recital of the poem in the native, in Taru, around the fire, and people chipped in. This is just before the translation. They were like, you need to add a line about this. But 90% of the poem was written in one go by Sangeeta, and then we provided our a rough translation, very rough translation the next day, just sort of like, and I was quite excited by it because it's like, he's like, I think here she's actually talking to the fish, and I think here she's talking about the power of fish, to heal you to protect from the cold. And here it's about this and that. And so I was like, wow, I think we have a really special poem here, and it's come out very fast, right? She wrote it in under a day. Then I had to go and film the poem recital with very light understanding of what exactly was being said. And then it was in the following weeks where we zeroed in on the exact translations, and her older brother Shanta, who has also really good English, helped us. There's another person that speaks Taru and American or English very well, and said it was a very accurate translation. Three or four people basically cross-checked it after lots of questioning and saying, "You sure you mean that you're talking, to the actual, the fish?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I'm doing."
So nice to hear that it was such a community involvement that was there for this film. You can't just do it just by yourself. You mentioned about electrofishing and blasting that's there in the Lade River. For people who do not are not aware of this electrofishing and blasting that's happening in the river, is there something that you would like to say about that?
Yes. Well, blasting is less common. You need to get hold of different materials, and they're harder to get hold of, but just as very destructive when you do. I personally witnessed electrofishing, and I heard stories from the community that there's even fatalities on the human side sometimes if it's done, in the very DIY way, and which is so electrofishing typically is a car battery with a long metal wire going off from the car battery into the river, and then they put a current through it, and this stuns the fish. And obviously, if you have your feet in the water, it's going to stun you too. It's not confined to the Ladja River. I think that humans always find ways to dominate nature, and this is just one example. It's the fish are stunned and they rise to the surface, and then they're easier to collect. Yeah, I mean, if people don't know what it is, that's what it is. And that obviously can impact a lot of fish all at once, and it will also impact generation of fish all at once. So from for the younger fish, all the way through to the fully grown fish. And that's why Machi, I was struck by the fishing trip because there was no normal sized fish. I was saying, what is the normal size of these fish when they're fully grown? And it's more like this, and we're looking at fish like that big. So yeah, so it has a very destructive impact. There are other things going on. There is pollution, and there is dams, and I don't know, all sorts. But I can only speak to the things I was hearing, and people were talking about, and that electrofishing, and I saw it with my own eyes. So it's obviously quite prevalent.
And how is the community responding to it? I mean, we saw in Machi that it is deeply impacting their livelihoods and also their culture. There's a cultural impact as well. But what other ways are there that it's impacting, and that what you've seen when you were there?
It's hard to say that because I wasn't there for too long, and I have asked. The film made it onto Water Bear as well, and they want you to connect the film to an initiative on the ground to learn more. And I searched high and low, for a an entity that would be tackling issues like this, and it wasn't easy to find. I know that USAID had done some work on educating people around the pressure on biodiversity from using these sorts of techniques. But again, there was no like place to send an email, or somewhere to send attention. So it's Machi actually is probably one, in that particular area of Dang, is a good tool for explaining in an educational way and fun way, or interesting way at least, um, that there's more things to consider than just an easy catch.
Now coming to your film being screened in India in 10 cities on August 22nd. So what would you like the audience to sort of take back from your film when they watch it at the film club?
It's a good example of how a localized voice or a community can articulate themselves and shows that we all think about these things to a lesser or greater extent. And I suppose if you take one thing away, it might be to think about your an environment that you consider to be home and um, see if there's any observations that Sangeeta's made that resonate with you and that you can maybe do something about or try and talk about at group events or cultural events or festivals that you have, and see if it's a shared experience and see if there's other people that think something's going really well or perhaps something's not going so well, and as a result, something else is impacted. I think that's the message from her poem. Yeah, I
Um,
think the a thriving environmental thriving ecosystems are connected to thriving cultural systems and a thriving culture, so that they're overlapping and they're not separate. And I think globally we're thinking more and more in this way. Um, yeah, so like we, Is a River Alive is a book coming out right now in the UK, but obviously in Ecuador, a river is alive. We're just starting to ask the question here in the UK. And does it have divine rights and so on and so forth? Um, and I think the role of artistic expression, yeah, you can just have a go at it, right? And I think it is an emotional thing that we do like to separate. Any form of artistic expression helps kind of bring it all together.
right. Right. And at this year at Altef, we sort of have such beautiful films that have come in, which actually are so much more artistic and really cut deep with this emotion of nature and coexistence and rivers. And it's just so lovely to see how creative this form has become. It's not just documentaries, right? It can be any sort of creative expression, to tell the story that you want. And it's very nice to see that coming up amongst people and filmmakers. And so finally, coming to my last question, where are you headed now? Like creatively, what are you working on or where are you going next?
Yeah, I'm two things, I suppose. One is I'm working on a project in Europe. There are a very special creature which has been extinct for many years, 400 years, and is starting to re-emerge. And hoping to be involved while I am involved with that story, telling the story of how this creature is making a comeback, and the people that are taking risks to do so. That's that in terms of film. And in the other side of my work, I work a lot in agriculture and regenerative agriculture, and I'm pursuing a few ideas within food waste for smallholders. But that's hopefully I can bring my storytelling to that, but it's actually more of just an idea because I get to speak to a lot of farmers from all over the place all the time and starting to build a picture of some of the shared problems, and maybe there are some ideas out there that could improve income and reduce losses on the farm from perishability.
Very interesting and actually something very topical at the moment with agriculture and farming practices. It's very interesting. What is this creature called that has re-emerged that you're working on right now?
Well, it is the beaver.
Oh, Beaver was extinct then.
Beavers have been extinct for a very long time in the UK and all over Europe, and let's say rogue rewilding effort and very difficult story to tell because it's very sensitive and needs to be done very creatively. But I feel comfortable saying that that's something I'm working on.
We're almost at time. So thank you so much, Owen, for joining us and giving us this interview.
Yeah, thank you
All
very much
right.
for your time.
Bye.
All right, you too. Bye.